Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see all of you. Welcome back. Hope the semester is not too stressful so far. Is it? No. Good. Look at that. He's chill. Okay, good. So we're kicking off a new semester today, and Swami Atmavidyananda ji, unfortunately, has decided to step down. He's been Hindu chaplain here for like 24 years, I believe, something like that. And so he served the community for a very long time, so we're all very grateful to him. And that means I'm on my own now. We used to alternate classes and stuff, so now I will be coming more or less every week. I'll be traveling sometimes, obviously, so I won't be able to come on some weeks. I'll let you know ahead of time. But in general, you're stuck with me, for better or worse. And I thought it would be fun and rewarding to talk about two doctrines, very unique doctrines of Hinduism that everyone knows about, like in general, but I think very few people have thought about deeply, namely the doctrines of karma and rebirth. Okay, they're so well known and so popular, in fact, that they're found in TV shows. One of my favorite examples is Big Bang Theory. Kunal Nair, the actor playing the Indian character, Rajesh Kutrapali, he used to come with his wife to the Vedanta Society in Hollywood a couple of years. He would come to my classes, so we became friends. So, but there's this line where I think
Sheldon talks about
and Rajesh.
Yeah.
And it's in this context of Penny is dating somebody, some guy. And then, what's his name? The one who eventually marries her? What's his name? Leonard Hofstadter. Tries to sabotage her date with him. And then Rajesh says, you're getting a lot of bad karma for this. And you're going to end up being reborn as a banana slug. and then they have this little funny conversation about karma. But I do think that captures a kind of popular caricature of the karma doctrine. It's like you do something bad in some ethical sense, and you will reap what you sow eventually. And that might take the form of being reborn as some kind of insect or something. Okay, so what I would like us to do in the next few weeks, because this is not gonna, I want us to go a little bit deeply into this. Okay, there are a lot of questions, issues, problems, subtleties, nuances. There are a lot of things that I want to kind of cover, not comprehensively, but just I think it's important. Now, why are these doctrines important? First of all, let me ask you, because many of you here are Hindu. Any of you are not Hindu, you might believe in the doctrines of karma and rebirth. Another interesting little factoid, a Pew survey done a few years ago, interviewing Americans, and this is just Americans, not American Hindus, but just Americans of any religion. They asked how many believed in rebirth. Over 30% of Americans. There aren't 30% of Americans are not Hindu or Buddhist or Jain or like a huge number of even Orthodox Christians, for instance, and Jews. They believe in rebirth. This is very interesting, right? There's something about these doctrines. And in fact, if you know something about the history of Christianity, there is a time in the first few centuries after Christ when this was before Christian doctrine was kind of codified, and all sorts of ideas within Christianity were being floated. One of them was rebirth. Origen, O-R-I-G-E-N, was one of these theologians, Christian theologians, who suggested this radical doctrine. And then eventually, a couple centuries later, they establish this creed which says, no, this is the only life we have, and so on and so forth. But the roots of this doctrine lie deep. Okay, so let me begin with a question first of all. So how many of you believe in the doctrines of karma and rebirth? Okay, he's doing this, and you're also that. Okay, what about you? Okay, so we got 4 yeses and 2. I'm sorry, online people here. So. Okay. Okay, that's good. I like this.
What about you?
You're gonna find out this semester.
I toiled away writing a whole book called Karma and Rebirth. Hinduism. Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do it if I just said that. So, anyway, so yes, I think that's good that we have a healthy mix of views, and it would be great if one person said, I think they're the dumbest doctrines in the world. But anyway, maybe next time. So
I can switch that.
there you go. Yeah, you can play it both ways,
play
right?
it.
So yeah, okay. So here's the thing. A couple of years ago, I was asked to write a little book. It's little. See how thin it is? They should have published it as a smaller book, and then it wouldn't look so thin. Right? But anyway, here's the idea. I don't know how many of you know about these book series, but at Oxford University Press publishes a thing called like very short introductions to so and so. This is the Cambridge University Press equivalent of that. Okay, it's not that, and I wish that they'd published it like a very short introduction, which is like a small, like it would be like a smaller booklety thing. It's more readable. But anyway, they decided to publish it in like the size of a normal book, but then they gave me a strict word limit of 30,000, which ends up being a 71-page book. So anyway, but it was a really fun book to write, and I don't actually think that, like, I think this is the right size actually, to be honest. It did, like, I actually was able to go fairly deeply into some of the big questions raised by these doctrines.
How long does that take, by the way, for you?
Like 1.5 to 2 years, I'd say. I've got lots of things going on in the Hollywood ashram, as Vladimir knows. So this is one of many things I have to juggle. Okay, so here was the task assigned to me. Okay, because this is not just like what's called a research monograph where I've done those. I've written those books before, where you can go deep. I've written 400-page books and whatever on Vivekananda's philosophy and Ramakrishna. It's not that kind of thing. You're a PhD student, and some of the people are, and you'll understand this. They literally have conceived this book series as one where because it's 30,000 words. It's obviously larger than an academic article, but shorter than a typical book, and so it kind of falls in between. And so what they asked me for is they want an introductory overview of these doctrines of karma and rebirth, at the same time giving the reader a sense of the scholarly landscape and the controversies and debates surrounding these doctrines. And at the same time, and this is the part that I had most fun with, because I'm not the type of scholar / writer to enjoy writing just introductions or summaries. Like I like to, I have like a strong personality. I want to like say something controversial that people can disagree with. And so they said they specifically wanted me to be argumentative. And so I call this, and this is how my abstract reads. I'll just read so you guys can all open your soft copies. And you can flip to basically like the page after the cover, or 2 pages in. And there's this little gray box which says abstract. So does someone want to just read the abstract?
Sure.
I want to get you guys involved. Yeah, okay,
Okay.
Vladimir.
Abstract. This element provides an argumentative introduction to the doctrines of karma and rebirth in Hinduism. It explains how various Hindu texts, traditions, and figures have understood the philosophical nuances of karma and rebirth. It also acquaints readers with some of the most important academic debates about these doctrines. The element's primary argumentative aim is to defend the rationality of accepting the truth of karma and rebirth through a critical examination of an array of arguments for and against these doctrines. It concludes by highlighting the relevance of karma and rebirth to contemporary philosophical debates on the variety of issues.
Thank you. All right, so I hope that gives you an overview of what's going on. You can flip to the table of contents on the next page. So there are 5 main chapters, and I'm not going to go through all 5 of them. Especially, I'm going to skip the first one more or less, but I want to run through them first. This is the structure of the book. Okay, Karma and Rebirth in the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. That's the first chapter. If you're interested in the earliest known scriptural sources for these doctrines, that's what this first chapter talks about. And the 2 oldest Upanishads that refer to these doctrines are, can you guess? It does refer to them, but there are 2 even older ones. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and? No, that's much later. Yeah, you can tell from the writing, the Sanskrit, that it's a later text. Chandogya. So Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad both talk about karma and rebirth for the first time within a Hindu context. Okay, I think they're the first known texts. Now, Bhagavad Gita, a text that I've talked about a lot at USC in previous semesters, obviously we know also talks repeatedly about these doctrines of karma and rebirth. What is the or one of the most memorable and vivid metaphors used by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita to explain the process of rebirth?
I think
And
it's
I'll
like,
give bonus points if you could just rattle off the Sanskrit.
I think
Yeah,
is it like how a man casts his clothes?
exactly. What chapter
So-
of the Gita?
I'm not sure. I think 8th.
Oh, you're a little off.
I think it's 2nd chapter.
Ah, there we go. Look at that. He corrected himself there. That was good.
What was it that's cast?
It's like how a man casts his different clothes, like how soul casts different body
Clothes. Okay, got it.
material.
The body is likened to the
The
clothes we're
clothes.
wearing.
Understood.
And yeah, exactly. Very good. Can you rattle off the Sanskrit? I'd be so happy if you could do that. Okay. Vasam sijinani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naro parani tatha sharirani vihaya jinan anyani sanyati navani dehi. Just as a person casts off his clothes at the end of a long day, his worn out clothes, and then puts on a new set of clothes, just so the embodied soul casts off one physical body and takes up a new one. So the basic point being, remember the context of the Bhagavad Gita. What was the context? Arjuna is supposed to be fighting in a war for justice. He's not just committing mindless violence. He's fighting for justice. Doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to kill his own kith and kin and his loved ones and his gurus and who are on the other side, on the battlefield. So this is one part of Krishna's argument to persuade him to fight in the war. Look, you're not actually killing their souls. Their souls are eternal. You can't kill them. You're killing the bodies, but they're going to take up a new one until they attain liberation. So don't worry so much. And you're fighting for justice. So that's the context. So that's basically chapter 1. I'm not going to go into the details. But here's what I wanted to ask you. As a segue into some of the nuances of what I want to talk about today, which would be really focusing on chapter 2. Okay, chapter 2 is nuances of karma and rebirth in classical and modern Hindu traditions. Okay, and it's the longest chapter for a reason, and we're going to see why. I don't think we should rush through this, so I would suggest that we slowly go through parts of chapter 2, and I'm not going to have you read every paragraph. I'm going to go through some of the main issues. And then maybe next time we can talk about chapter 3, which is arguments in support of karma and rebirth. And then chapter 4, arguments against karma and rebirth. And then we might discuss some of chapter 5. But so that's it. So it's at least going to be about 3 weeks. Okay. Okay. Now, so let me ask you this question, because 4 out of 6 said that you guys do believe in karma and rebirth. 2 of you are on the fence, maybe. Or whatever that means, which can have multiple meanings. Maybe you have 2 different meanings. But so let me ask everybody here. For those of you who do believe in the doctrines, first of all, what role does it play in your day-to-day spiritual life, if at all? Any of you. But do try to make it like personal, like whatever you're willing to share, but like not in a theoretical sense, but like how does it help you? Does it help you? Or is it some kind of like, yeah, I like abstractly believe it, or like I don't see why not, but it's not relevant to my day-to-day spiritual life. That's also a possibility.
One thing that's stuck with me from your previous lectures on
Yes.
karma is how you kind of viewed your injuries as this way of kind of fighting off kind of the bad karma
Exhausting
that
bad karma. Yeah.
accumulated.
Yeah.
And so when something bad happens to me or something, I kind of reframe it in my mind.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way of putting it. When something bad happens, but notice how you put that in quotes. It's air quotes. That's air quotes, sort of. Yeah, because that's good. Right, exactly. It's like from a worldly standpoint, it's bad.
Yeah.
But then because you have this spiritual orientation that's rooted in these doctrines of karma and rebirth, you can actually see that bad event as something that's positive from a spiritual standpoint. And it's a really nice word to use, that you reframe that. Bhaktas have a way of reframing things too. They call it, this is a concept, I learned it for the first time from Swami Tapasyananda, who is one of the great monks of the Ramakrishna Order. He was the vice president of the order. When somebody asks him about, why is it that God puts his devotees through so much suffering and so much pain? And it seems like the best people are the ones who put through the most suffering. And he suggests that the reason is what he calls viparita kripa. Viparita kripa, which means kripa, God's grace, but viparita, in the form of what seems to be its opposite. I think it's a powerful concept. That's a way of reframing, right? It's like something bad is happening to me, but then you have to ask yourself through prayer. It's not about just an intellectual thing, but pray about it and pray to God. There's, oh Lord, there's some reason why you're putting me through this. Show me what I need to learn from this. Why are you putting me through this? And that's a reframing. I really like that word. So thank you for that. That's great. Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts about how it can help you in your daily life?
I mean, it's my personal experience. So I'll tell you a story. When I just got to the US, I was in LAX, and I had a lot of stuff with me. So I had like 3 big suitcases, and I was trying to come by myself. And right in front of me there was this guy, and if you know, when you exit LAX, there is this small step, and then there is a road.
I know that, yeah.
This guy had a similar trolley, and when he went there, he tripped, and he kind of tripped, and his suitcases fell. I laughed. Okay, accidentally I laughed. And I know, I am aware that there is a step there. Because I saw him trip.
Okay.
I go and I trip there.
After laughing,
Yeah.
karma fala.
Yeah, and there are like all these vehicles, very fast vehicles moving. So it's and all my suitcases fell, and I had to rearrange them and take it.
Wow.
So I know that karma is watching me all the time. So I'm careful.
So next time you're not going to laugh at another person's pain. There's a great word in German that has been imported into English called Schadenfreude. Does anyone know what Schadenfreude means? SCHADENFREUDE. No?
Deriving enjoyment from other people's pain.
Yeah. You enjoy it when somebody else is suffering. So yeah, that's great, right? So exactly. So but did you really believe it, or are you joking? I mean,
No, I do believe
You
it,
do believe
because
it, yeah.
if I do something, if I have the thought of doing something nasty, then I know that God will use me as a lesson.
you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. So I do think
Good.
before
Okay.
how it affects other
Great.
people.
So we reap what we sow. Which is at the core of this doctrine of karma. We reap what we sow, right? I think that's great. Exactly. That can kind of check our, let's say, lowest impulses, or even though we instinctively want to lash out or do something selfish or bad, this doctrine may kind of help keep us in check, right?
Yeah.
So this is a good segue into, I think, one of the really murky areas when we talk about the doctrine of karma, okay? And here it is. I'm curious how you think about this. So we all agree that at the core of the doctrine of the Hindu doctrine of karma, and just the doctrine of karma in general, even for Buddhists, is this idea that we reap what we sow. Okay. Now, the question here is, how do we reap what we sow? What is the mechanism? What is the karmic mechanism by which we reap what we sow? Any thoughts on this? Do you understand the question? Anyone want to take a stab at it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think
And we can be concrete, by the way, take whatever example you want, either, you laughed at the guy's suitcase falling, and then,
Sure.
so how is it that
so in an ecosystem,
Yeah.
you have the dirt, the bugs, the moving up. You have small plants, bigger plants, largest plants. Each one of those is is receiving nutrients and putting things back into the environment that then cycle, right? And they're all interconnected in this incredibly complicated way. And so let's say the karmic action of a clover leaf is to take nitrogen out of the air, put it into the soil, and then that's one person's action. That's the karma. I don't know, maybe I'm off, but something there. Then it gets picked up by the next thing, and that thing will now carry that sort of motion forward. The tree now takes up the nitrogen. It does its thing. Let's say the tree falls, crushes the clover.
Okay.
Or is it like a domino effect?
Yeah, like a domino effect.
I see. Okay. I think what your analogy is illustrating is the interconnectedness in the sheer complexity.
So it's a
almost
very
unthinkable
difficult
complexity.
question because of how
The intertwining of each other's karma,
Yeah.
and how they overlap, intertwine, intersect, right? I mean, yeah, I think that's right. But I do think that these analogy, and I'll get to in a second, yeah. Or I don't even know if it was meant as an analogy or as an example, but with plants, it's slightly complicated. One of the reasons being that the doctrine of karma is, as far as I can tell, fundamentally a moral doctrine.
It was an analogy.
Okay, so it wasn't.
It was
so,
an analogy.
yeah. So the thing is, I think when it comes to things like plants, and of course Hindus do maintain, most Hindus, it depends on what sub-tradition you belong to, but most Hindus believe that you can be reborn as a plant, tree, insects, and not just necessarily human beings. But the question is, can you accrue new karma as a plant, for instance? And I think the answer is no. The reason being that it doesn't have moral responsibility for its actions. I mean, even what does it mean? I mean, you can talk about a plant's actions in a certain sense, like absorbing of nutrients and stuff, but it's submoral in a certain sense. Whereas human beings are moral creatures, and so what they do can be judged morally as morally good, bad, or neutral. And so the traditional Hindu view is that you accrue good and bad karma only as a human being. But then you might ask, well, then what's the purpose of being reborn as a cow?
You can spend on
Or-
bad karma.
You can exhaust your bad karma in these lower forms. And actually the opposite of that would be, it's mentioned in the Gita also, Kshine punye martaloka vishati, is that when you accrue a certain amount of good karma in a human birth, what happens? You spend some time in a temporary heaven, what's called Svarga in the Bhagavad Gita, until that good karma, that quantum of good karma is exhausted. And then what happens? You come back to the earth, which is called the karma bhumi, the place where you work out your good and your bad karma, and eventually it makes moral and spiritual progress to the ultimate goal of liberation. Does that clear up some things? Yeah. Okay, but what do you feel unconvinced
Why
about?
do you draw the line at where do you draw the line? Like take the whole animal kingdom, whatever
They
those.
don't have the sixth sense to do
Well,
what they
They
think.
Well, look,
exist. They have an
it's very
awareness.
Yeah, they do, but I think it's a pretty clear line. At least this is like the intuition. I think the traditional Hindus kind of shared it. Humans are the only animals who are morally accountable for their actions.
No, I don't mean
Oh,
on that section.
what are you
I
asking
mean on
about?
why can't a tree burn off bad karma?
It does.
Okay.
By
Okay.
living-
Oh, okay. That was my
by living-
misinterpretation.
Hitler may very well be
I
a
thought you
tree,
meant
which
only
was turned into
animals.
that screen. So we,
Okay.
that's the whole point.
Then
is
I'm
that,
totally
yeah.
aligned. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, absolutely, exactly. And that could be a worse punishment than being born as a dog. It depends on what, being a street dog in India is not quite as comfy as how the dogs are treated here. Dogs are treated better than human beings here almost. So, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, okay. So now, but coming back to this, back to this main question because sorry, Yorgos.
Yeah, going back to your question, using that analogy, I
Mm.
wanted to say that this system only works because the sun is giving its energy.
Okay.
So we can perhaps say in this analogy that the mechanism that enables this whole cycle to happen is the sun itself and the energy that it provides into the system. Because otherwise, due to friction and then the
Okay. And so, what is this? Is this an analogy or an example? No,
That's an analogy, and I
Is that-
think I can.
Is
I'm
that
extending
God?
saying-
Is the sun God?
Yes.
AI. It's some giant AI superintelligence.
Yes, it is.
What are we talking about here? GPT-17. Huh? No. Give me what is the sun in your own analogy?
The sun is the enabler of the whole system
Okay,
because if the plants keep doing this, at some point they're gonna exhaust all the energy into like heat, which is gonna dissipate,
Yeah.
and then they're all just gonna die.
Okay,
There's
great.
no-
So great, very good. I am going to take the liberty of interpreting Yorgos' son as God. Okay, so this is interesting. So there are some internal debates within Hinduism, among Hindu traditions, about whether the doctrines of karma and rebirth presuppose a higher being, a supreme being, who is, the Sanskrit term is karma phala data. Karma means karma. Phala means the fruits or consequences. Data, the giver, the dispenser. So you need to posit a supreme, omnipotent, omniscient being who knows all of our karmas, which is the omniscient side, and omnipotent is able to give us exactly what we deserve. And knowing that the sheer the breathtaking complexity of all the different ways that our karmas are intertwined, and then this is only a super intelligence can fathom that and just right. So one of the arguments in favor of accepting a God as the dispenser of the fruits of our karma is that if you just have this mechanical law of karma without that super intelligent being behind it, there's going to be chaos. There's no real mechanism for the distribution of the karmic results in a way that's fair and systematic and law governed, for instance. And so so you might ask, any guesses as to what Hindu tradition accepts the doctrine of karma and rebirth but without a theistic God governing the process?
Like Mimamsa, Nyaya, something.
Okay, so the ones that are the most prominent schools that believe in the doctrines of karma and rebirth but without a God are Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya is just straight up. It's like it depends. It's like some are atheistic, some are agnostic. And yoga is a little bit more complicated. I'm teaching a class now at the Hollywood Center called Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and there are several sutras on Ishvara, and even on that you should try to cultivate devotion toward Ishvara, surrender to Ishvara. But what exactly is Ishvara? And so it's this kind of $1 million question, and then scholars have all sorts of interpretations of what Ishvara means. But in general, in the yoga philosophy, it's pretty clear that Ishvara is not the theistic God. He's not the one who dispenses karma. So they don't believe so neither Sankhya nor Yoga believes in God as the dispenser of the fruits of our karma, whereas some of the Hindu schools that do posit a God as the karma phaladata are Vedanta and Nyaya and Vaisheshika, actually. Kashmir Shaivism, for instance. Do you know that school? Does anyone know it? It's there are other names for it. Shaiva non-dualism. It's a tantric tradition. Abhinavagupta, if you've heard of him.
But some people also say that even gods don't escape karma, right? Like that's why.
I think that's for the lower gods, like
Lowercase g and then plural s.
Capital G.
So there's a big difference between lowercase god and capitalized god. What is that difference? What would be the Sanskrit term for lowercase god?
Deva.
Devtas.
Deva and devata. Deva and devata. It's the same thing. They're just different words for the same thing. And then capital god.
Parabrahman.
Parameshwar.
Parabrahman, Parameshwara. Yeah, that's fine. And Bhagavan. And there's so many terms you can use for God. Shvetashvatara Upanishad refers to Brahman in a beautiful mantra as Karma Adhyakshaha. Karma Adhyakshaha. The Lord or controller of all of our karma. So that's a very explicit reference to God as the karma phaladata. Okay, this is one example of many. Okay, now, but I still want to circle back to the same question because I still haven't gotten direct answers to this question. Here it is. She laughed at the guy whose luggage fell on the ground. And as a result, her luggage then fell on the ground. She reaped what she sowed, right? What she had sown. How did that work? That's what I mean by the question is, okay, so she laughed at the guy. That wasn't, it's not like a bad thing, but immoral. We're just for the purpose of this. Okay, so it was an unethical act. So she accrued, so then what happened? Well, I don't want to say anything. I want you to, so how does that bad action lead to you dropping your own luggage? That's what I liked.
So why I did like this in the beginning is I think it's karma as I perceive it, and if it would be workable, is like through some sort of like, it's not causal, it's correlational.
Okay, explain that.
So in the sense that if you take the time to start laughing at somebody else's misfortune, then you kind of put resources of your brain into that specific thing, and therefore you're not careful to avoid the same obstacles as they did. And further on, like for actual like ethical actions, then you get like some, let's call it social credit, one part, and the other part is maybe you get like some satisfaction yourself. You become maybe a calmer and more pious person, let's say. And then because other people perceive you as such, they're more likely to treat you better in the future. They're more likely to try to defend you against someone who's trying to do injustice
Okay,
to you.
very good.
So
Okay.
it doesn't prevent like a rolling stone from a hill from crashing onto your car and killing you, but on average, someone who say has good karma is gonna get back more from the society, and
I have
therefore
a clarifying question.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Thank you. And now we're on the right track here in terms of yes.
So would you say that that karma is located in like the body, that it's something, an effect of like the physical?
not necessarily, not
'Cause
physically.
you mentioned like the brain and like.
But
So-
but he seems to be giving a naturalistic explanation.
Yeah,
It's
so
not-
if you are helping other people, then you get a calmness in you, which translates into you
Like-
being happier.
But not like wired, but it sounds like wired differently. Like you're doing happier, and so like your brain's thinking in a certain way. You rewired your brain.
Yeah.
You
so
see why I'm thinking like, okay, understood.
some sort of like you could like if you do charity all the time, I'm sure you have rewired your brain to be different than like the
But
average
I
person.
think the interesting takeaway from his suggestion is that any atheist scientist who's non-Hindu will be happy to accept what you're saying. All those things you just said. There's nothing about that explanation that is like I don't want to say dogmatic Hindu, but like that requires you to be a card-carrying Hindu to accept them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, now this captures one of the two main ways that Hindu thinkers have tried to explain the underlying mechanism of having us reap what we sow. Okay, now back to my book. But you had a question, right?
Or I guess I just had a comment.
Mhm.
This is less of his like naturalistic, everyone can accept it explanation, and more of like a rooted in my own beliefs
Yeah,
explanation.
yeah.
But I believe it's kind of like a one-to-one. Like if you do something bad, you get something bad, and if you do something good, you'll also get something good. But not in the sense of like, oh, if I do 4 small bad things, I can just get one big bad thing in return, and like it'll like even out. More like you reap the exact fruits of what you sow. Like there was
It's proportional, is what you mean.
yeah, and like
The rewards are proportional
also-
to what you've done.
yes, but also like I remember we were told this story when we were younger where like there was a saint that like trapped a parrot in like
A saint who
or
trapped
like
it.
Ramadas, if you've heard, he like trapped this one
Ramdas.
parrot in like a cage, and that's why he had to suffer years of like being trapped and like being later because he trapped a parrot. So it's not like, oh, like it's proportional to the suffering that you cause as well.
Right, yeah. I mean, actually, that's an interesting, there's a proportional karmic reward and punishment depending on the deed. That also varies across different traditions within Hinduism. And so Manusmriti, for instance, which is one of these old classic texts, Dharma texts in Hinduism, he'll go into this like kind of graphic detail about how like, and especially for some reason he was on this kick, vegetarian kick. And so he was saying that if you eat something like some animal, you're going to end up being born as that animal that you had killed, and then you are going to be brutally slaughtered. And then so there's like this very eye for an eye kind of a understanding of. But not all doctrines of karma within Hinduism are that kind of one-to-one in that way. You know what I mean? Thank you. Yeah. So okay, Yorgos here. When I asked what is the underlying mechanism behind this principle of we reap what we sow, right, in the doctrine of karma, he gave an explanation, as I said, that any atheist would be happy to explain, or most atheists. I don't see any problem with that they would have with it. Now, that's what I would call a kind of naturalistic explanation of the underlying mechanism of karma. What do I mean by naturalism? It means you don't need to believe. It's like a lot of scientists are naturalists, especially in universities like this one. I have a friend at UCLA who's a physics professor, and he's a Vedantan too. He comes to my talks and stuff, and he tells me that he has to kind of keep his Vedanta close to his chest because they're gonna think he's like a bad scientist if he comes out of the closet as a Vedantan. So anyway, so most scientists are kind of naturalists in this sense that they. I think that the more rigorous scientists, the more honest scientists, should be methodological naturalists rather than ontological naturalists. What do I mean by that? It means as a method, as a scientist, you bracket out the question of whether God exists and stuff like that. Because for the purpose of scientific investigation, it's neither necessary, and then it will probably be a hindrance because you're trying to give natural explanations for things. That's okay, I don't have a problem with that. Methodological bracketing. But to claim that science has disproved the existence of God, that's when you get into Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens kind of territory, and I think it gets really problematic. Anyway, so, but naturalism means basically that I just believe in the stuff that I can perceive with my five senses, suitably extended with microscopes and telescopes and so on. Therefore, I don't believe in anything transcendental or anything metaphysical beyond what I can perceive with the senses, okay? Right, and that's the kind of explanation you gave. Now, can you turn to, in your soft copies, the PDF, page 8 of my book? Do you have the soft? You do, right? Soft, yeah, okay, good. Okay, now, what I explain on page 8, are you there? It's 2.1, the shared tenets of karma and rebirth across Hindu traditions. Yeah, some of you know it in your head. Okay, good. What I do in this first couple paragraphs, the first 2 paragraphs, is the following. I explain very succinctly that there are 2 main ways in which Hindu thinkers have explained the underlying mechanism behind this karmic principle of we reap what we sow, okay? And I came up with these terms, like, oh, I don't know if other people have also used the same terms, but it's just a rough way. There's a psychological explanation and there's a metaphysical explanation, okay? The kind of explanation that Yorgos is giving is at least partly psychological. It's also partly social. He mentioned social approval as an incentive for then doing good acts in the future, but it's partly also psychological. These first 2 paragraphs explain respectively the metaphysical, and none of you mentioned the metaphysical mechanism. Can you guess what I mean by before we look at what we're about to read? What would be a metaphysical? No, she just looked at it. I'm asking you not to look at it. Okay, so what would be a metaphysical way of explaining how we reap what we sow via the doctrine of karma? She laughed at that poor traveler's luggage falling on the street, and then her luggage ended up falling. Explain that metaphysically. What would that look like?
If I can attempt an explanation, we can maybe take the simulation hypothesis as a working hypothesis.
Okay.
The programmer that has built this simulation that we live in is keeping one variable per person, which is karma. And then using that, he's like modulating the simulation to kind of trying to push karma towards 0 maybe.
Mm-hmm. I followed about 5% of it. Are you an AI robot? Okay. I honestly didn't really follow it well, sorry, but you're going to try to explain that again.
Yeah, so when you accrue good karma, then this variable that says Medhananda karma starts to become positive.
Oh, okay.
And so the simulation will modify itself in order to push it closer to 0. Again, when you make it negative.
What's the 0 here?
I think 0 is balance,
Neutral.
without neutral, like no bad karma, no good karma.
Okay,
Moksha.
neutrality. But is that moksha or is that just like
No,
blah?
Moksha is just like stable.
Yeah.
Moksha and blah are not the same thing, huh?
No, I don't think
Moksha
so.
would be like you.
Because
have
you
an
even said if you
imaginary
accrue some
I
good
think
karma,
what-
you spend some time in like this temporary heaven until your karma is again 0 and then you're brought back.
Oh,
to
okay,
something
okay,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I think you're moving in the, yeah, okay, yeah, first Satvika and then Vladimir, yeah.
So, like, question then, if you accrue enough good karma and then you supposedly go to some like Swargam or heaven and then you come back.
Correct.
So is the idea that a good karma isn't enough for you?
Yeah, great question. This is one of these, it seems to me to be one of the most important questions to ask. It's an urgent question, especially from the standpoint of spiritual practice, right, within the context of Hinduism. And yet, the question is rarely asked. It's very strange. I mean, I've read the literature very thoroughly, and so I do address that question actually, and it's also in the same first couple paragraphs. And so I suggest that we read this carefully. Now, coming to I think we should kind of try to remove the kernel of what you're saying from its AI husk, because it just makes it a little bit easier to grasp. So that is basically what I'm doing in the first paragraph. So now, who wants to read other than Vladimir? I want everybody to kind of, Aman, I'm choosing you. Okay, so now read this paragraph. According to
the Hindu doctrine of karma, we reap what we sow, in the sense that the moral quality of our actions, good, bad, or morally neutral, shapes at least in part our future state and circumstances, either later in this life or in a subsequent birth. Most Hindu thinkers have explained the karmic effects of our actions in metaphysical terms. Good, dharmic actions, done with the desire for their karmic results, generate merit, punya, which results in happiness, sukham, and favorable future circumstances for the agent. While bad, adharmic actions generate demerit, pap, which results in unhappiness, dukham, and unfavorable future circumstances for the agent.
This, in a nutshell, captures what I would call the metaphysical picture of how we reap what we sow.
Still doesn't provide the mechanism though.
Why? Well, let me explain what I understand by the mechanism, and then you can explain why that's not a mechanism. Okay, she laughs at the guy's luggage falling, his mistake. What happens? Her action, that immoral action, generates papa. Okay, which is a kind of metaphysical unit or something. Okay, bad karma. That's what people popularly refer to as bad karma. That bad karma, that papa, results in unfortunate, unfavorable circumstances for her in the future. And in her case, it was pretty immediate. It could actually fructify in a later life. That's why the doctrines of karma and rebirth go hand in hand in Hinduism. Because sometimes the karmic effects of our actions don't obtain until a future life. Okay, but why is that not a mechanism then?
I think he means
like
who
how do
decide
you-
what action, like
Who
who
deci-
decides what result he gets, something like
Is that what?
How did that make her trip? Like that papa, like is, I suppose it's accumulates somewhere in the universe. It must
No,
exist.
it's metaphysical. That's what I'm saying. Is it's non-physical.
In a metaphysical
It's
sense.
a non-physical unit or something.
So how does that lead? What's the mechanism that
Right.
changes her perception of the ground where she misses that there's a step there and makes her
Right.
come?
How? I mean, going into the nitty-gritty of that is, I mean, honestly, I think that one of the reasons I'm interested in astrology is because just as the moon can affect the tides, right, there's a beautiful full moon yesterday. Likewise, Vedic astrologers say, these Jyotishis, they say that the planets can have distinct influences on our minds, on our behavior, right? And that could be a kind of intermediate or aspect of the kind of nitty-gritty explanation that you're asking for, which is like, how does a metaphysical unit like bad karma or good karma, papa, punya, dharma, adharma, how does that translate into, like causally speaking, how does it then impact the physical world and the mental world, right? And so you can posit these things like planets, and of course God is behind the planet, so it's not, so it's God governing the
You can
workings
have
of
a
this.
metaphysical mechanism too. It's just
You could,
God
yeah.
is going and just messing with your brain circuits to.
He could
make
also
you
do that.
trip.
I mean, there's so many ways. And I don't want to say there's only one way. There are multiple ways. So God can literally just intervene because he's omnipotent. I don't think he usually wants to do that. He prefers to kind of let the natural laws work themselves out. But then there are also the effects of planets. And that's why in India, people who believe in these things, they have these almanacs, right? And Sri Ramakrishna, for instance, he was a great saint, but who also strongly believed in these things. And so he would always be looking at the almanac, see if it's an auspicious day to be traveling, to do this or that, what's a good day for meditation. And these things, some people really feel that there are certain days where they're feeling more sattvika. And other days where they're more rajasic or more tamasic. And this kind of, there are times in the day which are considered to be more sattvic. So there's a time called 4 a.m., Brahma Muhurta, the time of Brahman, when it's perfect for meditation, and so on and so forth. So, okay, so that's kind of, okay, so now, this is, in a nutshell, the metaphysical, and let me just, I wish I had a board so I could just, okay. Dharmika action, a good action, error, leads to what? Punya, P-U-N-Y-A, merit. It's a metaphysical unit. It doesn't exist in the world in the sense of a table existing, but it's a metaphysical unit, good karma. That results in what? Sukham, simply. That often just means happiness, but the basic idea is, I like to say, favorable circumstances. Favorable circumstances, favorable emotions, mental state, So people born with depressive tendencies, the Hindu will say, it's not victim shaming or something, but the idea is just that's inherited from a previous birth. That's karmic. right? What you're born with, whether you're born with a cheerful disposition, an optimistic cheer, a pessimistic, cynical disposition. I mean, all of this is karmic, actually. Yeah.
Going back to both Shefali and Gaudakus,
Yeah.
think about it as like, again, the zero kind of thing, going back to the zero thing. Suppose Shefali starts at 0, and then it's -1 or whatever because of her life, right?
Okay.
Why doesn't she stay at this state of dukkham, and like why does it go back to the 0? Like she burnt off some kind of bad karma by something bad
because she
happening to
suffered
her,
more.
right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
she's suffering.
So she exhausted the bad karma.
But like, why does it happen in the first? Like, why would it not just stay in a state of like happiness, or why does it have to like reverse, go back to the state of 0? I guess.
Okay, I mean, I think it's touching on Satvika's question. So I do want to, because I address it like a little bit later. So these are both very good questions. I think they're interrelated. So I want to address both of them. It requires reading. Okay, so now the next paragraph, the second paragraph, explains the psychological account of the mechanism of how we reap what we sow. Sudarshan's going to read that for us. Okay.
However, some Hindu thinkers have also explained the karmic effects of our actions in psychological terms. From a psychological standpoint, good actions generate latent mental impressions, samskaras, that reinforce the tendency to perform good acts in the future, while bad actions generate latent mental impressions that reinforce the tendencies to perform bad acts in the future. As a result of this invariable psychological process, any actions one performs repeatedly form eventually into a habit, which plays an important role in shaping one's character. It should be noted that numerous Hindu thinkers take the metaphysical and psychological accounts of karmic results to be complementary rather than mutually exclusive.
Very good. Okay. Doesn't this paragraph sound a little bit like what Yorgos was talking about earlier? The idea is, in this paragraph, atheists are perfect, and not just atheists, but people who aren't religious, and they're perfectly happy to say that I do something bad, there's a kind of feedback loop, it changes my brain chemistry, it makes me more likely to commit similar bad acts in the future, right? It strengthens that inherent tendency to commit the same bad act in the future, and it becomes a kind of a vicious cycle. But the opposite is also true. There's a virtuous cycle where I do something good, and then that reinforces the brain chemistry in such a way as to make it more likely that I'm gonna do the same kind of good acts in the future, and so on, right? And then you also add this interesting dimension of social approval, and that's also a part of it, but that's also karmic, actually. So people who get a lot of approval for what they're doing, name and fame, praise, recognition, that's also karmic. Okay, so it all falls within the orbit of this doctrine of karma. So that's what I'm calling the psychological picture. And then the last sentence is also very important, which you just read, which is that, and I think that a lot of people, when they talk about the doctrine of karma, we reap what we sow, good karma, bad karma, there's an ambiguity there between these two different ways of understanding how we reap what we sow. I think sometimes what they assume or mean is the psychological explanation, and other times they mean the metaphysical explanation. Sometimes they mean both. And it's crucial to understand that for a lot of these Hindu thinkers, these two accounts are complementary. They don't necessarily conflict with each other. They may, and you may prefer the psychological account at the expense of the metaphysical, and say the metaphysical one is speculative and there's no proof for it, so this is more scientific, it's more like the psychological one is more rational. You might go that way, okay? And the yoga school seems to believe that, and I talk about that later in chapter 2, okay? But there are other schools which say that, yeah, we accept that psychological system, but over and above that, there's something happening at the metaphysical level at the same time. And both are true. And they're kind of interrelated in complex ways. How do they interrelate? It's not really discussed in great detail here. And it might be that these thinkers are like, well, God alone knows because he's omnipotent, and these things are so subtle. Gahana karmano gatihi. Where is that from? Anyone know? Gahana karmano gatihi. It's a beautiful little statement from one of our great scriptures. Gahana karmano gatihi. What it means is, mysterious are the ways of karma. Bhagavan Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. Come on, guys. Yeah, Gahana karmano gatihi.
I have a question. So, when we talk about the accumulation of good karma, the end goal is to attain moksha and not.
Now we're coming back to Satvika's question.
Yeah.
Exactly. So now, see, you guys are You're like, we have to read your whole book. Okay, so now we're going to read the next paragraph, which addresses now Satvika's question and Aman's question and Chef Ali's question. I hope at least starts to address. Okay, so why don't you do the honors and read this?
Okay. While Buddhist traditions uphold rebirth but deny the existence of an eternal self, most Hindu traditions hold the incarnating hold that the reincarnating entity is an eternal conscious self distinct from the physical body. Moreover, according to the vast majority of Hindu traditions and thinkers, a given soul's karma is beginningless, and hence there was no point in the past when it first began to accrue karma.
Accrue.
Accrue karma.
Okay, good. Actually, the paragraph that's directly relevant is the next one, but still, I think this is important stuff. So let's read it and then, okay.
At the time of death, this eternal self leaves the physical body and is eventually born in...
Reborn.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually reborn in another physical body here on earth. Most, but not all, Hindu traditions hold that between physical embodiments, the soul may, for some time, have positive or negative experiences in another realm, such as a temporary heaven, swarga, or a temporary hell, or place of purgation, naraka, depending on the karma it had accrued in its embodiment, its last embodiment. It is possible to be reborn on earth not only as human being but also as non-human animals, and according to many Hindu traditions, even as plants. It is also possible to be reborn as a celestial being, deva, in another realm. However, all Hindu traditions consider birth as a human to be greater from a moral and spiritual standpoint than any other kind of birth. Malkani.
You don't have to read the sentence. Yeah.
Okay. 1965 to 58. While non-human animals and plants are submoral, celestial beings inhabit blissful realms in which they have little incentive or opportunity to evolve morally and spiritually. Hence, birth as a human being is distinct opportunity to work out one's karma and make moral and spiritual progress.
Okay, there's a lot there in that paragraph. I'm kind of giving the nuts and bolts of Karma 101, some of the main aspects of the Hindu doctrines of karma and rebirth. Any questions about that before we move on to the next paragraph, which addresses the questions that you guys had?
It looks like being born as human is a punishment, actually.
But it's a blessing in the guise of a punishment. It's kind of the way I would see it. It's a blessing in disguise, right? Okay. Wait, can we turn down? Like it's stuffy, right? Don't you find it a little stuffy?
I think it's in the other.
So can we just? Well, somebody who knows, like at USC, can somebody? Yeah, Satvika, maybe. Yeah, do you mind?
Do you want to crack the door too?
Yeah, it's behind. It's hiding behind Buddha, I think. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, because you had brought up the devas and devatas earlier, right? Here's the problem with being a deva. First of all, why is it a good thing? It's pretty cool because you have these special powers that humans don't have, very positive experiences, you're chilling in heavens and stuff, but they're basically posts, stationed, like an ICS officer, you know, it's like you do really well on the exam, you're put in that post for a certain amount of time and then you give it up to somebody else. So if you accrue enough good karma in this life, you may be reborn as a deva, a kind of Indra or something like that, and do all sorts of fun things. But what's the problem? These devas are not making any spiritual progress. In fact, they do a lot of naughty things. If you read the Puranas, you'll know that.
Does Greek gods also?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Greek gods, exactly. The Greek gods are kind of like the devas, yeah, exactly. So, right, the Zeus and the this and the that, becoming a swan and then doing bad things with women. And, yeah. Huh?
I think they're equivalent.
Yeah, they're
has
almost,
an
yeah.
interesting theory, you should talk to him.
Okay, well, that's another. Okay, yeah.
So are like devas and devatas like Indra supposedly temporary? Like you know how we hear stories
Yeah,
about
that's the whole
them?
point.
So like
They're temporary posts.
They are, I
So
think
it's
this
not-
Manvantara's Indra. Like we
Oh.
live in a set of time where after every period of time the post changes.
so is there like a new soul in Indra, or does Indra just no longer exist?
No, and then another soul will be born as an Indra.
Oh.
Yeah.
But I thought they were immortals because of
No.
the some right like some.
They just live for really long time.
No, these time periods are these like, there's not even any point in even trying to like calculate them and how long the Kali Yuga and this and that. So let's not get hung up on those things. But the point is, it is a blessing to be born as a human being, even though superficially speaking, it may not be as fun or as positive with the air quotes that you use for, right? Why? Because it's here on earth, which has by nature, by necessity, a mix of positive and negative experiences that we grow and evolve morally and spiritually. It's because when I put my finger in the fire and my finger burns and then I feel pain, that I learn what? Not to put my hand in the fire in the future,
Yeah.
right? And the same thing applies to moral actions. I do something, I hurt somebody, for sure I'm gonna feel bad about it, either because my conscience pricks at me, and usually that's accompanied with they also get upset with me, that has ripple effects on other people, and then I feel bad in the future. What happens? I'll be less likely to do that same, hurt that person in the future in the same way. Especially the quicker the learner I am, right? The more likely it is that and some people are slow learners. They may have to hurt somebody 5, 10 times, 100 times before they learn the lesson, but eventually they do, if not on their deathbed. I mean, so it might be very late, but they do, right? And Vivekananda used to say, suffering is the great eye-opener for that reason. So you see how punishment, but it's a punishment, but see, it's not just, it's a mix. And the point is, it's because it's a mix that we grow and learn. And because these celestial realms are not a mix at all, it's just sheer positivity, we don't grow. And in these temporary purgative places, like these temporary hells, narakas, it's the opposite. It's all negative. And so its only function, what is its karmic function? To exhaust our bad karma. We do something really bad, like Hitler, he probably was in this, he might still be in some kind of a temporary hell kind of a situation. And he's exhausting, and it's not pleasant there. But, on the other hand, it's not eternal. Not like some of these traditions would say you're doomed to an eternal hell. That's not the Hindu doctrine. Well, it depends. We talked about this when I talked about the different traditions within Vedanta. Which tradition of Vedanta explicitly upholds the doctrine of an eternal hell for some souls?
Dvaita.
Yeah, Madhva's Dvaita Vedanta, or what's called Madhva Vedanta. He has what's called a Jiva Taratamya, which means a hierarchy of souls. And there are 3 categories. There's Mukti Yogya, which are the souls destined for liberation. There's a middle category, which is Nitya Samsaris, souls who are destined to endlessly reincarnate. They're just stuck, they're trapped in this cycle of transmigration. And then the lowest category of soul, Tamo Yogya, which is very dark. It literally means those souls who are destined for the darkness of eternal hell. So it sounds very fundamentalist Christianity. So we got that in Hinduism. You asked for it, we got it. So, but fortunately, most Hindu traditions, they don't believe in a doctrine of an eternal hell. But there are those temporary hells, and I think even that's very rational, and there's no problem with that. The soul will go there, undergo negative experiences. Through that experience, it burns off bad karma, then has to be reborn again as a human being, and then they're given another chance. How many chances? Aneka janma samsiddhas tato yati parangatim. Bhagavan Krishna again, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6. Having attained perfection in the course of many, many lifetimes, one eventually attains the highest goal of life, which is realization of the self or God.
So even the souls in America don't supposedly make spiritual progress?
They do, insofar as by being there, they exhaust their bad karma. That is progress, right? Because so long as you have that bad karma, you're kind of stuck. Exhaust the bad karma, you get a fresh start in a new human birth, and then you take off from where you left off before. Do you see what I mean?
But the souls in Swarga don't make spiritual
They do,
progress?
by exhausting good karma. Kshine punye matlokam vishanti. This is the exact phrase from the Bhagavad Gita. When you exhaust your good karma, after residing in this celestial realm, what happens? This temporary swarga, you come back to the earth realm. And then, whether you're going to do a mix of good and bad things, usually ordinary people will do some good things, some bad things. They accrue some good karma, some bad karma. Until eventually, the proportion, the ratio of good actions to bad actions gets higher and higher. That's what moral growth means. That's what spiritual evolution means, right? Until we become saints.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the idea. So now, hello, welcome. You can have a seat on the floor if you don't mind, because we don't have chairs to offer you, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, we're discussing my book, Karma and Rebirth in Hinduism. Can we somehow get the soft copy going, or is that going to be too?
Are they on the WhatsApp?
You guys mind sharing?
But then now you lost it. Okay, you
That's
can
okay, I can listen.
Okay. Okay, so now we finally get to the paragraph that addresses the questions raised by 3 of you at least in different forms. So, who is going to read this? Satvika, you do the honors.
In most Hindu traditions, the ultimate aim of life is not the accumulation of good karma, but liberation, moksha, from rebirth, which can only be achieved through the exhaustion of all karma, both good and bad. As we will see, however, Hindu traditions differ on the question of precisely which spiritual practices lead to liberation and how they do so. Nonetheless, all Hindu traditions hold that actions done with desire,
Sakama. See that line? The horizontal line of the A makes it ah.
sakama.
Yes,
For
sakama.
their karmic results always have karmic consequences, while good actions done without desire, nishkama, for their karmic results, help to purify the mind and exhaust one's karma, thereby bringing one closer to the goal of liberation.
Yes, thank you. This paragraph, I hope, begins to answer your questions. See, it's not just what we do, but how we do it that matters from the standpoint of this doctrine of Dharma. Okay? Now, let's give a concrete example here. Let's say I volunteer at a soup kitchen. Okay? You might think, wow, good karma, but not quite. Yeah, it is a good karma, at least superficially, right? You're serving the needy. Great. But what's your inner motivation? Now, there could be many. If you're a high school student and you're trying to get into Harvard, this could be a nice thing to brag about on your college essay. And it's a nice CV, line on your CV. And then people will praise you. Or another desire could be desire for praise and recognition. These are all rajasic motivations, okay, put in terms of the gunas. Now, a more spiritual motivation would be, Sri Ramakrishna used this phrase, Shiva Gyane Jiva Seva, which means you should serve others in a spirit of worship and devotion by trying to see the divine in everyone, in the people that you're serving. So if you have that attitude, what happens? That means there's absolutely no selfish motive behind the action. It's a good action. Outwardly, it's a good action in both cases, working at the soup kitchen. But the question is, what's the inner motivation? So if there's even a trace of selfishness, you'll produce good karma, but that's not going to help you toward liberation. Are you following? But if you do the same good action, externally or outwardly good action, but with an unselfish motive, that's what's nishkama here. So sakama means selfish, basically. I have a selfish desire or motivation behind the action. Then I accrue good karma. I might enjoy in a heaven for some time, but then I have to come back. And that's not helping me toward liberation. It'll just go on like that. Actually, Mimamsa, you brought up Mimamsa earlier, Aditya, do you remember? It depends on, because see, when you get really into the weeds on these things, you have to start taking a kind of what's called a diachronic approach. You can't just say Mimamsa doctrine is X, because the Mimamsa tradition itself evolved in the course of time. And so very early Mimamsa doesn't even believe in moksha. They don't believe in liberation at all. Okay, and so Mimamsa will just say basically, Svarga kamo yajeta. This is one of the famous mantras in the Vedic hymns. Svarga kamo yajeta means what? If you desire to go to heaven, the person who is desirous of going to a temporary heaven, what should he do? He should engage in ritualistic sacrifices. Exactly following the rules, point by point, mentioned in the Vedas. If you do that, what happens? You enjoy in a temporary heaven. But then what happens? You have to come back here eventually. And then what do? Do more ritualistic sacrifices. So it's literally this cycle of you perform sacrifices here on earth, in order to enjoy in heaven for some time. Then again, you come back to earth. You do more sacrifice, and you. So okay, so that's a picture in which there's no real moksha. There's no escape from it. It's pretty depressing. What happens later in Mimamsa is that they're kind of influenced by other traditions which believe in moksha. Yeah, and so then even some of the Purva Mimamsa people start to accept the doctrine of moksha, and then but that's a kind of watering down of what I don't know. It depends on how you interpret Mimamsa. So anyway, but the point is, if your goal is moksha, if you're a spiritual aspirant, just accruing good karma is not good enough. Okay. So better to work in the soup kitchen, but try to purify your motives. Analyze yourself. Be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, why really am I doing this? What's my main motive for doing this? And if you find even a trace of selfishness, try to get rid of that. And you have to be really honest with yourself. A lot of people, this is where self-deception creeps in really easily, because we don't like to admit that there are base or selfish motives behind what we're doing. And because, especially when we're getting praise all around us because we're doing something objectively good, you know what I mean? Oh, dude, you know, I feel so guilty because when I was out partying, you were at the soup kitchen. You're like, oh, well, you know, I can't help being so good, you know. But then again, see, but that itself is a kind of, you know, you're looking for that kind of praise, which is itself, that means that there was a little bit of at least a hidden selfish motive behind it, right? And you kind of stealthily, you know, like they're asking, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And like, oh, you know, I was like this and that, but you're kind of like, it's like people who went to Harvard, but they don't want to say that they went to Harvard. So so you're kind of like indirectly hinting at it in such a way that the person's going to ask you directly, and then you can, oh, I went to Harvard, and then, oh, Harvard. So like people will do the same kind of game if they do something really. Some of them, like the people who have more selfish motives, you know. So you have to catch yourself in the act of doing those kinds of things. Brutally honest self-assessment is a really, really important part of spiritual life, it seems to me, is that you have to be really honest with yourself. Yes?
So it's possible that in an earlier life, I was at the same kind of level of good karma than I am now, but I might be closer to niskam now than I was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's through self-analysis that you arrive at that, where you realize like, oh, wait a minute, I've been doing this my whole life, charity and all that. But at the back of my mind, I've had this desire for recognition. And then the moment you catch yourself, that doesn't mean you stop doing charity.
Yeah.
It means you purify your motives. You do the same charity, but now it's Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva. I'm trying to serve the divine in the form of these human beings. And then what happens? Now this is interesting because actually there are different traditions within Hinduism have slightly divergent views on this, and I have a footnote on this. Savarpyanji, the world famous Vedanta preacher, he's a good friend of mine. So he helped me see this. So I added this footnote 11. Who wants to read footnote 11? Aditya. On page 9. It should be noted, however. Oh, you're reading from a phone. Okay, that's hard.
9 or page 9, 11.
Okay.
It should be noted, however, that Hindu traditions differ on the question of whether good actions done without desire for their results also generate karmic results in the form of merit punya. According to Sadananda's Vedanta Sara, the popular treatise of Advaita Vedanta, good acts done without the desire lead primarily to purification of mind, but they also have secondary results, avantarapalam, in the form of karmic reward, such as going to Pitraloka, the realm of ancestor, or Satyaloka, the realm of celestial beings after death. By contrast, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra holds that spiritual practices done without desire for their action, for their results, are neither white nor black actions.
Shukla Krishna Karma.
Shukla Krishna Karma, in that they generate neither merit nor demerit, but lead instead to liberation.
Okay, this footnote it's nuanced, but I think it's important, and it's related to the kind of questions you're asking, which is like, now, remember this scenario, same soup kitchen scenario. Okay. First scenario is I have some selfish motive behind doing that charity work. And what happens? I generate some good karma. I get a good, nice birth, next birth, and so on. I'm happy and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. But not help me toward liberation. We understand that. Second scenario, I work in the same soup kitchen, do the same actions externally, but now my motive is unselfish. It's nishkama. Okay, so that, what does it do? It works to purify my mind, What does purity of mind mean? It means you reduce your selfish tendencies and your selfish desires, basically, your worldly desires. Okay? But then there's this interesting question. Does that mean that that person who's working in the soup kitchen without any selfish motives won't accrue good karma? Are you following? Because then it seems like a little bit of a raw deal. Because in scenario one, the person who has selfish motives is the one who's getting the good karma. And then the one who's a pure spiritual aspirant and doing it completely unselfishly is getting his mind purified, but not getting the good karma. So Yoga Sutra seems to hold that position, actually. Seems, at least that's on my reading, and I could be wrong, actually. You could try to refute me. But as far as I can tell, Patanjali says in 4.7 that if you do an action completely unselfishly and it's a good karma, it will not generate good karma. And in fact, that's a good thing from a spiritual standpoint, because when you generate good karma, it's yet another link in the chain of transmigration, right? And so, because then you're like the Mimamsa's kind of cycle where you go to heaven and then come back and then you go to, right? You don't want that. Okay, but then Advaita Vedanta, at least this is one tradition that goes against that, and it says when you do a good action completely unselfishly, you do purify the mind, you do make progress toward liberation, and yet that good action done unselfishly has a secondary result, what's called avantara phalam, in the form of good circumstances in your next birth, and maybe even just in the future. It could be in this birth also. Are you following? So I find that more appealing, and it's less of a raw deal. If you get both, 2 for the price of 1. You purify the mind, you make progress toward liberation, and you're also going to get good karma.
So that would mean to attain moksha, you should be just doing nothing. Because secondarily you accrue good karma, whatever, if you do good actions.
But doing nothing, is that a good action?
It's neutral.
I think you don't go spiritually towards the top if you don't do nothing.
That's the thing, is that doing nothing, especially I'll give you a stark example of where doing nothing is actually extremely immoral. You see a 5-year-old drowning and you're a very capable swimmer. Doing nothing is, you're going to actually accrue bad karma by doing nothing in that case, right? But even in the case of just like, if you just sit there for 7 days. Now, what are you doing while sitting there? One thing you could be doing is meditating on God and the self, and then you actually are making progress toward liberation if you do that. But is that doing nothing? No, that's meditating, right? That's doing spiritual practice. But are you following what I'm saying?
Not exactly.
Ooh. Okay, so what don't you get? Or explain what the...
But if you want to attain moksha, you should exhaust your good karma as well.
Yes,
right?
Sure.
So ideally you should not be accruing positive or negative karma.
Yes.
So you can go into like some cave and meditate until you die of dehydration, and then...
Right. Yes. In fact, this is a good point. And in fact, the ideal in a certain sense, in some very ascetic traditions of Hinduism, Jainism, actually that's not Hinduism, but anyway, but Jainas have this ideal of starvation after attaining the realization of yourself as a Purusha, as a soul separate from the body-mind complex. Because they say that's the logical, because if you do anything, actually they'll say these things like, there are critters on the ground, like germs, which have souls. And so with every step you take, you're killing creatures. So better to sit still, stock still. And then, so monks, like strict Jaina monks, what do? They wear a mask so that they don't breathe in by accident microscopic creatures, which they then end up killing and swallowing. They carry a broom with them, or some sort of a broom, to sweep aside the little organisms that may exist as they walk on the road. They only eat the fruit that falls from trees, so that they won't even pluck vegetables, because that itself is a form of violence. And so the logical kind of consequence of that would be something like you got to sit stock still. And in fact, so Sankhya, yoga, even depending on how you interpret these traditions, they all suggest that when the yogi has become sufficiently spiritually evolved, the ideal is literally to just, in lotus posture or whatever, just do literally nothing and starve yourself to death. And that's considered to be a very laudatory thing. Now, if an ordinary person who has not actually made much spiritual progress tries to do that, they're not going to be able to anyway. And it'll become, they're going to end up being the hypocrite described in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, Mityachara Sauchate, the person who, in very impressive lotus posture and, very Instagrammable kind of photos here, wearing their hottest outfit. But what are they thinking of the whole time? Worldly things. They're not meditating on God or the self. And so you're not making any spiritual progress that way. But if you reach a very, very high level and your mind is completely bereft of any kind of worldly desires and tendencies, then sitting completely still, the yoga school will call this a very high state of samadhi, a sampragyata samadhi, and you're kind of locked into this. And Sri Ramakrishna actually says a person who is locked into this state of highest samadhi will leave his body within 21 days. So along the lines of what you were saying. Okay. Somebody back there had a question. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Shreyansh.
Shreyansh. How do you spell that?
SSREYANSH.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned about if you want to get good karma, you should do good deeds for unselfish reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you give an example of doing a good deed but for like a selfish reason? Like,
Yeah, well, I gave one, right? Which is, I'm working in the soup kitchen, but so that I get praise from other people, or so that I can get into Harvard, or I get my name in a newspaper.
Okay, so I have this question. If I'm working in the soup kitchen because it is socially regarded to be a good action,
Yeah.
and doing this would make me to be regarded by others as a good person.
That's recognition. That's
So
a
is-
desire for recognition, right?
Yeah. So is that also a form of
Yeah.
selfish?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So do I get no good karma for doing it?
You do get good karma
But
for
it's
doing
less
it.
than what you would do.
No, hold on. Notice what I'm saying. These two, the distinction is, in the case of doing like working in the soup kitchen with a selfish motive, you do accrue good karma.
Mhm.
But that's the problem from a spiritual standpoint. Because that's not going to help you toward liberation.
Okay. Got
It'll
it.
give you enjoyment in the future, worldly enjoyment in a certain sense, even if that's a worldly enjoyment in a higher realm. But if you do that same work in the soup kitchen, but with an unselfish motive, what happens? You purify the mind, you make progress toward liberation, and depending on what tradition of Hinduism we're talking about, you also accrue good karma. So you get the two for the price of one kind of situation. Are you following?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think today we should wrap it up because it's already 7:57. Yeah, okay.
It's
Aman.
not a karma question, but rebirth question.
Okay.
Since it's in your footnote, you mentioned
Yes.
that we're in the season of Pitru Paksh, and I wanted to ask you, with the time when our ancestors are supposedly supposed to visit us, right?
Whoa, okay. I'm learning this from you.
No, but you mentioned the heaven, right? The
Yeah.
temporary heaven
Oh
where
yeah,
our
that I know.
ancestors
Yeah, the
reside in.
Pitriloka.
The
Pitriloka,
right?
yeah.
So
It's a
based on
realm
that-
of our departed ancestors. Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
So what's the question?
So then that's what Pitru Paksh is. It's like the Dia de los Muertos. in
Yeah, I didn't know that there's a
Asia.
season in the year
Yeah, I think
when.
it started yesterday or whatever.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's for like 15 days.
My grandma, is she around? I don't know. Okay, so anyway,
So that's what I was gonna ask you is like, is that the people, and I know this is not really an abstract thing or very strange, but supposedly the people who visit us, would they be only the people who got the chance to be in Pitru, or not the people who were immediately reborn, or kind of
looks like
that?
these you.
I know it's a,
I think it's
Unless
like
they're trying to sell you something, nobody's going to give you a hard and fast
Yeah,
answer to this
yeah,
because
yeah.
the thing is, everything depends on how evolved a soul is. Some souls have the least interest in reconnecting with the people in their. Who cares? If you really are very spiritual, you're not going to be very emotionally attached to these people. It's people who are very rajasic who are very attached. You know, it's like if somebody's been married for 50 years and then they lose their loved one. I've seen, because some people come to the ashrama, it's like their whole life is over. You know, it leaves such a, and then there are other people who are more spiritually oriented. When their spouse leaves them, they say, you know, like it's this is from the Bible, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. You know, if you have that attitude, then you go on, life goes on, and you're completely surrendered to God. It's amazing, and you have this whole range of. So I mean, that's an indirect way of answering your question because it depends on how attached you are to the people that you miss or whatever.
Right.
Some people don't miss them at all, and so, and those people also those souls may not be very inclined to visit you, right?
right, but I guess the question was like, are they even capable of visiting, or had they been reborn kind of already?
It just depends on.
Yeah.
So there's no one answer to
Yeah.
that. It just depends on where they are. So based on their karma, what they did in this life. So some of them are not going to go to Pitraloka. They're going to go either to some temporary heaven, or even if they did really bad things, temporary hell.
Yeah.
Or they might have been incredible saints in this life, and then they're just going to get straight liberation. And then there's no question of them visiting you again. Of course, there could be there's some very rare souls who are kind of bodhisattva types, Sri Ramakrishna called them Vijnanis, who after attaining liberation will come back, reborn. They'll choose to be reborn, even though they don't come back because of their own karma, but in order to help others out of their ignorance. That's also possible. So there are many possibilities, and so that's kind of a... Okay, very good. So good. I mean, this is good, and I like the discussion, and I think you guys are also... I mean, there are a lot of things we discussed which I assume you hadn't thought about or hadn't thought about very deeply, right? So this psychological versus metaphysical understanding of how we reproduce, so and so on. So I'd like to, for us next Monday, to continue with this book. And those of you who don't have the soft copy, catch me afterward and I'll send you or have somebody send you the soft copy. Yeah, Aditya will take care of that. Just go to Aditya. I'll send you the soft copy. Why am I doing this illegally? No. This is a Cambridge University Press. It's a special series called Cambridge Elements in Global Philosophy of Religion. And I got funding from the John Templeton Foundation to make it open access. And so that's why the soft copy can be freely distributed.
Oh wait, so if you publish, your publisher might not allow you to freely share your own book if you don't.
Of course, yeah. If it's not open access, yeah, it's illegal.
That's the point about technical papers.
Yeah. I mean, even authors of their own papers may not be able to access their articles after they're published because it's behind a paywall, right?
But I would think if I have it like locally, I'm able to legally give it to like you, send it on WhatsApp.
It becomes illegal. It's illegal unless it's open access. Now, do I still do it? It's being recorded, so I'm not going to say it. Yeah. So, but yes. So I don't have any guilt about this because it is an open access book. But if you want a hard copy, $23 on Amazon. Okay. So, okay. And Varun, the dean here, Varun Soni, has generously offered to arrange a book talk for me. So I'll probably be giving a talk based on this book here at USC, maybe later in the semester. I'll give you details on that once that's arranged.
Not early November, please.
Why? Oh, you're not gonna be here, or what? Okay, we'll figure that out. Okay, so let's wrap this up, and we go Arati next. Thank you so much. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. So next week, next Monday, 6:30 p.m., same place, right?